Order, order, Sir Alan Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that on the 26th day of March 2025, Mr. Speaker to issue his warrant to the Clerk of the Crown to make out a new writ for the electing of a member to serve in this present Parliament for the county constituency of Runcorn and Helsby in the room of Michael Lee Amesbury, who since his election for the said county constituency has been appointed to the office of Steward and Bailiff of His Majesty's 3 Chiltern Hundreds of Stoke, Desborough and Burnham in the county of Buckinghamshire.
The question is that on the 26th day of March, I do issue my warrant to the Clerk of the Crown to make out the new writ for electing of a member to serve in the present Parliament for the county constituency of Runcorn and Helsby, in the room of Michael Lee Amesbury, who, since his election to the said county constituency, has been appointed to the office of Steward or Bailiff of His Majesty's 3 Chiltern Hundreds of Stoke, Desborough and Burnham in the county of Buckingham. As many are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Right, we now come to questions to the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, Ewan Steinbank.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will take questions 1 and 21 together. Our Warm Homes Plan will upgrade up to 5 million homes with technologies such as heat pumps, solar panels and insulation, helping families to lower bills and improve their homes. Last week, we allocated £1.8 billion to local authorities and social housing providers to help low-income households and social housing tenants. We will publish further plans following the spending review.
Mr. Speaker, the Warm Homes Plan delivers a welcome uplift in resources for domestic energy efficiency. Failures from governments, energy companies and local authorities over a number of years have left my constituents paying huge energy costs. Poor connectivity, failure to install smart meters, or those smart meters not working when they are installed, as well as the not fit for purpose electric heating systems in the Braes villages. Does the Minister agree that the Government must do all it can to end fuel poverty, and will he meet with me to discuss how to hold those accountable for ongoing issues in my constituency?
My honourable friend raises a number of important issues there, Mr. Speaker. It's about having a tough regulator in Ofgem, it's about smart meters that work, and it's about every decision the Government takes seeking to tackle fuel poverty. That's why I was incredibly pleased that we announced the extension of the Warm Homes discount to an extra 2.7 million families, an extra £150 next winter to help families. That's what this Labour Government is all about.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the energy efficiency measures that my right honourable friend mentions. This will really make a difference to many families in the future. But what can the Government and energy providers do to help families struggling to pay their energy bills today?
Well, my honourable friend speaks with great expertise about these issues, and she will know that my honourable friend, the Minister for Consumers, put in place with the energy companies £500 million this winter to help families struggling with their bills. We also want to see Ofgem proceed with this plan on relieving the debts that many families face, because this debt overhang from the cost of living crisis that we saw after Russia's invasion of Ukraine still blights so many families in our country. If we move forward on all of these fronts, we can tackle these issues.
Tim Farrell.
I very strongly support all efforts to increase energy efficiency and bring down bills. Is he concerned, though, about the potential unforeseen consequences of raising the minimum level for EPC certificates to C for long-term rented accommodation, but not doing so for short-term lets and for owned properties? Because won't that just create an incentive in communities like ours for people to go to Airbnb or to second home ownership rather than providing affordable homes for local people?
Well, look, the honourable gentleman raises an important issue. I believe I'm right in saying, I was checking with the Minister for Consumers, that as part of the consultation on energy efficiency, we're looking at the issue of short-term lets as well, because this is an issue that has been raised in the past, and I think he does raise an important question. And he's right to draw attention to what we are doing here, because this measure, which the last government proposed and then backed away from, a pattern we're seeing quite a lot at the moment, Mr. Speaker, will take up to 1 million families out of poverty. And it's a basic principle, which is that if you're renting a home, then you pay your rent on time, you have a right to live in decent, warm accommodation.
Louis French.
Question 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Oh my word. The rules are up.
Good morning, Mr Speaker. With permission, I'll answer questions 2 and 7 together. Our clean power mission will end our dependence on volatile fossil fuel markets, giving the British people the energy security they deserve and driving jobs and investment into our communities. We're already seeing the impact of the clean energy transition, with thousands of jobs being created across the country in CCUS, hydrogen and offshore wind, and more nationally significant solar power being approved in 8 months than the previous government managed in 14 years.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The London Power Tunnels project has been a positive story locally in Bexley, as National Grid has worked with the community to minimise disruption with a plan to restore the site. However, the Labour government's planning reforms have now led developers to propose 2 extensive industrial battery storage facilities on a nature conservation area and farmland locally in Bexley, which do not meet fire safety guidance. Whilst we need infrastructure, does the Minister agree that weakening greenbelt protections against residents' wishes and damaging nature in the process to meet Labour's unrealistic grid targets will result in bad developments in inappropriate places?
Well, I'm glad he draws attention to the London Power Tunnels. Both my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, and I have visited recently. They are a fantastic example of engineering and what we can achieve if we set ambitious targets in this area. I would disagree with them gently on the wider point, though, which is that we are going to have to build infrastructure across the country in order to get the benefits of the renewable energy that we're generating. Battery storage is important for that. Of course, communities have a voice through the planning system. It would be wrong for me to comment on individual applications. But we should not, and I think it's important for the honourable gentleman and his colleagues to remember that we cannot simply block every infrastructure project that needs to be built. We need to build for the economic growth of the country and for our energy security.
James Wyatt.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Once again, the Minister has failed to answer the question about what the estimate of costs is. But we do know the government's dogma-driven 2030 target will imposed in Walpole in my constituency and across the country against the wishes of local people, damaging our countryside and relying on Chinese supply chains that the Energy Secretary was visiting only over the weekend. So when will the government realise that their approach of ruling out underground options and attempting to buy off local communities on the cheap rather than listening to them will only drive opposition to their plans?
Well, I think once again we hear from the party opposite about all these grand plans that they wish they had done in the 14 years that they were in government, when they could have moved forward on undergrounding if they were so keen on it, but of course they did not. And look, the reality of this is that it's not for us to set forward what the design of individual projects would be, it's for individual companies. The reality of undergrounding is that it estimates 5 or 10 times more expensive to do so. And look, the bottom line of all of this is that the leader of his party earlier today was moving away from the commitments that she made on net zero. But just a few years ago, she said this, that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has made it quite clear that relying on authoritarian regimes can make it harder for us to heat our homes. They recognised then the importance of this net zero transmission. Now they're running away from how we deliver on it.
Chair of the Select Committee, Bill Lesterson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The electricity bills in the UK are the highest in Europe compared to gas. Evidence to the Select Committee suggests that the government is absolutely right to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, and it's a shame that some members opposite have abandoned an evidence-informed approach to policy making. But can the Minister confirm whether the government is considering rebalancing the infrastructure levies on our energy bills as a way of reducing those electricity bills and as a in the immediate future and as a down payment towards 2030 and beyond?
Well, the Chair of the Select Committee makes an important point, and along with my honourable friend, the Minister for Consumers, we are looking at all options, because it is important that we bring down bills, that we're building the energy system that protects us from the volatile fossil fuels in the future. And so we will look at all options. There are trade-offs to be made with rebalancing that we need to be aware of, in particular whether a diminishing number of gas customers can pay bills if we were to transfer levies. But we're looking at all options, and of course we're also looking at how we review with Ofgem the wider question around standing charges to make sure we bring down bills. But he's right to say that the journey that we are on, that the party opposite used to be on, that there used to be consensus about, is that our transition to net zero is important for energy security and for the climate, but also for protecting bills in the long term.
Billington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is clearly aware of the foolhardy decision by the opposition to abandon the political consensus on net zero. I'm wondering whether he has made an assessment of the cost to the consumer of pursuing this disastrous path, locking us into our dependence on polluting fossil fuels, volatile oil and gas prices, and the whims of foreign dictators.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, of course, and it is important for us to recognise that where once there was consensus in this country on how we tackle the climate crisis, but also crucially how we deliver the economic and industrial advantage, that consensus today seems to have splintered by the party opposite. And of course, it was only 2 years ago that the leader of that party made, I think, a very important point, and I agree with her very strongly here, when she said, if we get our strategy wrong, we risk being left on the back foot as other countries seize the advantage. Well, the party opposite now wishes us to be in the back foot. We are determined that we will drive forward because it is the best policy for consumers, for our economic growth and for energy security.
Shadow Minister Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's rush to decarbonise the grid means more hidden costs, more curtailment payments, more balancing payments, more subsidy and a higher carbon price. So can the Minister guarantee for the remainder of this Parliament that our carbon price will remain lower than the European price?
Well, I think the honourable gentleman knows more than anyone, actually, about the previous work that the previous Prime Minister Theresa May did in this area, the work that, of course, his party is now moving away from quite rapidly. They were right then. And look, the truth of this whole question is that the only way for us to bring down bills, deliver economic growth and, yes, absolutely, tackle the economic opportunity of the future is for us to be on this journey together. That is something that the party opposite used to strongly believe in. We will continue in this path because it is the right thing for the country to do.
Timothy.
That was a long-winded answer, Mr. Speaker, but he didn't actually address the question. And I think he just gave away that it is Labour's secret plan to increase the price of carbon. A massive rise in the carbon price, adding hundreds of pounds to family bills and decimating British industry. So given Labour's election promise to cut bills, will he take this moment, he can look up into the camera if he likes, and promise the country that by the next election, bills will be lower as they promised? Yes or no?
Well, I think, never mind long-winded answers, that was a very long-winded question, and I have not revealed any secret plans, but I think the party opposite have revealed their not-so-secret plan today, and I can tell the country it's just as disappointing as the one they rejected 7 months ago. We have been very clear that our commitment is to bring down bills. We are determined to deliver on that. But unlike the party opposite that left consumers right across this country exposed to volatile fossil fuels, where Bills is quite right to point up, bills went up and up and up when his party was in government. We will bring them down. That party wants to take us back to the fossil fuel casino, and we won't do it.
Nick Smith.
Number 3, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 3, 5 and 11 together. This Labour government has ended the historic injustice of the mine workers' pension, and at the end of November last year, the first uprated payments for the pension scheme landed for over 100,000 miners and their families. This is an average increase of 32% on their monthly payments, or an average additional £28 a week.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for her answer, but also for her hard work increasing payments to mine workers and their families across the country. After digging for coal for many years, 1,600 miners and their families have received an uplift of nearly £30 a week in my constituency in Blaenau Gwent and Rumney. However, progress is needed still on the staff superannuation scheme. Now, the trustees of this scheme confirmed to me that the average age of pensioner members is 76. So with time marching on, can the Minister please outline the next steps to help members of the staff scheme?
Can I thank him for his remarks and for his question? Of course, he's right to talk about the BC scheme. The initial focus of our work was for the mine workers pension scheme. That was in our manifesto, and it was a commitment we had to work at pace on, and we are working with the government actuarial department on how the surplus sharing arrangements are going to work going forward, which is a big piece of work that is underway. But of course, he's right to point to the tens of thousands of people who are on the BC scheme. And I too have met with the trustees, and we are working as fast as we can to work through the issues associated with that scheme. The two schemes are different, they operate in different ways. Government is guarantor for both schemes, but I will be reconvening trustees to continue discussions with them to take this forward.
Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the last general election, I made a promise to ex-miners in my constituency that a Labour government would deliver justice on the MPS Investment Reserve Fund and return it to its members. And I'm so delighted at the end of last year that this government has delivered, providing over a 32% boost to their pensions. There are, however, in my constituency over 600 BCSSS members who are still really concerned about this issue. I welcome the Minister's answer on that. Can she reassure them and me that the trustees will continue to update the members of that scheme? Because at the moment they are, there is a degree of uncertainty as to what progress can be made over the coming months.
Can I thank him for his question and his concern for his constituents who are on the BCSSS scheme. Look, I am very receptive to calls from the BCSSS trustees. I wrote to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury at the end of last year to begin discussions, and we have received a positive response from the Chief Secretary, and we are now taking the next steps to move this process forward.
Len Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're only partly there in the pension justice for miners. The British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme has around 40,000 members who formerly worked in mining industries, including a number of my constituents. This included many women who were amongst the lowest paid in the coal industry. My own mum worked in the pit canteen. Can I assure my constituents enrolled in the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme that transferring the £2.3 billion investment reserves to its members is a priority for this government?
Can I thank her for the question? She's right to point out that there's about 40,000 people on this scheme, and about 5,000 of them are women, unlike the Mine Workers Pension Scheme, which is the vast majority men. The two schemes are different, and they operate in a different way, because in 2015, the BCSSS scheme had run two deficits, and it was at risk, and there had to be an intervention from government. So the two schemes operate differently. They have to be looked at differently. The government actuarial team are currently working their way through the mine workers pension process. We are now working with officials. I'm meeting with officials later today to talk about this more, to see what we need to do. I have to stress it's very complex. We're talking about billions of pounds worth of assets, but we are absolutely receptive to calls from the trustees, and I will be meeting with them again soon.
Dan Tomlinson.
Number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. We're driving forward at speed to deliver clean power by 2030. Last week, the government introduced the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which will enable the biggest expansion of the grid for generations, sweeping away the connection delays to the queue that held us back for too long under the last government, and reforming the planning system to speed up delivery. We've also laid out for the first time legislation to provide households near new or upgraded pylons £250 a year off their energy bills for 10 years as part of our commitment to deliver meaningful benefits for communities hosting clean energy infrastructure.
Dan Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that community energy has a vital role to play in the transition to cleaner and greener power? And would he accept an invitation to come to my constituency in North London to visit Community Energy Barnet, who are working on one of the largest community energy projects in the country?
I always like visiting North London, Mr. Speaker, and I would very much like to accept an invitation from my honourable friend. He makes a really serious and important point about community energy. If you look at Germany and Denmark, they have done much better on community energy than us. That's a really important role for Great British Energy, and we'll be saying more about this in the coming weeks.
Sir Oliver Dalden.
Does the Secretary of State share my concern about reports of persistent misconduct from DRACS regarding cutting down old-growth forest and burning it at that power station. To be clear, this is a company that chops down pristine forests, ships it halfway across the world to burn in the United Kingdom and claims it's sustainable. Will the Minister look again at the large amounts of subsidies that have been approved by this current government to that company?
I don't know whether the right honourable gentleman, who I have great respect for, was at my honourable friend's statement on precisely this question. He will be delighted to know that under the new arrangements that this government agreed, there's been an absolute transformation when it comes to the scale of subsidy to Drax. It's halved in terms of the impact on bills, with a windfall tax. I'm sure he's in favour of a windfall tax when their profits go above a certain level, and much, much higher standards of sustainability. We should take these issues seriously. He's right about that.
Whereas, Mr. Speaker, they abandoned the economy, the NHS, the justice system and immigration. Now the Conservative Party is joining the dunce corner inhabited by their reform collaborators and other climate change deniers. Does the Minister agree with me that, unlike this government, which recognises the 2030 triple benefit of energy security, transition to renewables and job creation, the Conservative Party has no solutions to 21st century Britain?
I mean, my honourable friend shouldn't be so shy and retiring, in my view, Mr. Speaker. I think my honourable friend makes a really important point. I listened to the interim Shadow Secretary of State on the radio this morning, and he made net zero 2050 sound like a target dreamed up by me. It wasn't dreamed up by me. It was Theresa May, the former Conservative Prime Minister, when he was the PPS who legislated, when he was the PPS, he was supposed to be the man implementing it, legislated for net zero by 2050. Why? It's the right thing to do, so we can have clean homegrown energy, so we can get the jobs, and so we can protect future generations.
Seamus Logan. Mr. Speaker, the plans for a green generator at the Peterhead power station in my constituency are shovel-ready, but they depend on approval for the Acorn project at St Fergus. On November the 12th last year, the Minister stated in response to a question from me that the Track 2 projects, that would be more information available in coming months. So given that 4 months have now passed, can the Minister provide an updated timescale on the outlining what these next steps are?
Yes, look, I support the Acorn project. It is a really, really important project. The right place to make decisions for this, is for the reasons he will understand, will be at the spending review in June.
Sarah Edwards.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know that people are worried about their energy bills and that too many are struggling to afford them. That's why we agreed £500 million of industry support alongside our Warm Homes discount to ensure that £1 billion of support was available for households that are struggling with their energy bills this winter. We will continue to take action to support consumers in the short term as we sprint towards clean power in order to bear down on energy bills for good.
Sarah Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency, a local hospitality business's energy provider, E.ON, has behaved appallingly, back-billing and incorrectly billing, leaving them nearly bankrupt. Whilst I welcome the new expanded remit of the Energy Ombudsman, we need to ensure that they have the capacity and the powers to protect businesses. Would the Minister meet with me to discuss this case, and can they outline what the government is doing to ensure that our local businesses are not driven to bankruptcy by outrageous behaviour of energy suppliers?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to meet with my honourable friend to discuss this case, but let me be very clear about this. There are clear rules in place to protect consumers from unfair back billing, and energy companies must comply with these rules. I've met with Energy UK, the industry body, and Ofgem in order to reinforce our expectation that if rules are not complied with, Ofgem will take enforcement action. But look, there is a broader point, Mr. Speaker, which is that we have to ensure that the energy market is working for consumers and is fair. And that's why we're reviewing Ofgem to ensure that it has the mandate, the duties, the powers, including the Energy Ombudsman, in order to be an effective and strong consumer champion.
George Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the record, I and my constituents are proud of the Southern North Sea development as the largest wind farm in the world under the last government. But what we are not happy about is this government's rush to force our consumers to pay higher bills, see a very, very important agricultural area of Norfolk turned at vast subsidy into farmers farming solar panels rather than the food and the security, the affordability we need, abandoning agricultural leadership in net zero. Can she reassure my consumers that £250 is an adequate compensation for higher bills and the defoliation of a large part of Norfolk in her rush for ill-thought-out net zero targets set in London without any consideration of local people?
Mr. Speaker, the last few years have shown us why we must absolutely break our reliance on global fossil fuel markets. Under that government's watch, energy prices spiralled, and it's consumers across the countries that were paying the price. Now, that is a reality that side of the party is happy with and was happy to contend with. It is not a reality that we think is tenable. So we will sprint to clean power, because that is the route by which we determine and achieve energy security for the country and financial security for family finances. We are on the right side of history. We are on the side of consumers. They are deluded.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Blackpool, we have over 250 charities doing incredible work supporting people with mental health, getting back to work, but also cost of living. But too many tell me week in, week out, they can't afford to pay the bills. Can I ask the Minister what conversations she's had with the energy companies about supporting these charities, and will she agree with me, to meet with me to discuss this important issue?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. Charities and third sector organisations play an absolutely vital role in getting support to households that we know are struggling with bills. Part of the reason why we thought it was so important to agree that £500 million of industry support is to make sure that we were getting additional support to households. We are also consulting on extending our warm homes discount to 2.7 million households, so that over 6 million people will be getting help. And we will work with the energy sector to make sure that we are using the vital network of charities in order to get that support to the households that need it.
Richard Tash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The price of gas is some 20% lower than it was at the beginning of this year, and yet the Secretary of State promised the bills would come down. So, can the Secretary of State confirm when will the bills come down for consumers compared to the fact they're going up by 6% on the 1st of April?
Mr. Speaker, I would encourage the honourable gentleman to check his facts. The price cap went up, which was disappointing for families, and the reason it went up was because of the spike in wholesale prices. It is because of our reliance on global fossil fuel prices. I will say it incredibly slowly for him so he can understand. It is because of our reliance on global fossil fuel markets. That is why we must break that reliance. We have to wean ourselves off this roller coaster of price spikes and price falls that is harming consumers across the country. The sprint to clean power will achieve that. It's a shame that he cannot see that.
Can the Minister, John Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Consumers are concerned about the rising energy cap. What will the Secretary of State do to further strengthen existing energy schemes and initiate new schemes? And will this include delivering the £300 reduction in energy bills that the party opposite promised for the general election?
Mr. Speaker, we know that households are struggling with bills. We know that households are worried with bills. That's why we are doing everything that we can to bear down on bills. We are doing it not just because it's a manifesto commitment, but absolutely because it matters to households across the country. And whilst we make that sprint to clean power, which we are very clear is the route in which we bear down on bills, we will do the job of supporting households. So whether that is the agreement we agreed with energy suppliers, 500 million, whether that's the extension of the warm homes discount to over 6 million households, whether that is the debt support that we're providing for consumers that gained energy debt, we are taking short-term action. But let me be clear, the way we get ourselves out of this bind is to deliver clean power for consumers across the country.
I'll pick that up.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Start.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for her continued interest in this very important question. Despite significant challenges, COP29 agreed a new climate finance goal and finalised guidance on international carbon markets. We would have liked to have seen more progress in certain areas like mitigation outcomes, and we're now looking forward to playing a very important role in the run-up to COP30 in Berlin to ensure more progress is made. Mr. Speaker, tackling climate change should matter to all of us because it affects all of us.
The UK has led the way in setting strong climate targets at COP29. So how is the Minister ensuring measures are in place to track progress against our COP commitments? And how is she working with businesses, local authorities and industry to deliver on those targets and drive investment? Thank you.
My honourable friend is right. We earn the credibility to show international leadership by delivering at home. We will publish a cross-economy plan on how we will meet our climate targets in due course, including outlining the policies needed to meet our 2035 NDC. We're engaging with a range of stakeholders on delivery, including through the Net Zero Council, which has a very busy work programme, and through the local Net Zero Delivery Group.
Xuexiang.
Speaker, and thank the Minister for that answer. Can I ask the Minister this? What assessment has the Minister made of the COP29 commitment to triple finance to developing countries from the previous goal of $100 billion to the $300 billion annually by 2035? And can I ask, what is the UK's contribution to this money?
Good question.
Always a pleasure to answer questions from the honourable member. We do remain committed to international climate finance and to the new climate finance goal agreed at COP29, and the level of the UK's contribution will be considered as part of the spending review. We'll also be looking at how we can maximise investment from the private sector.
Matthew Patrick.
Question number 9, please, Mr. Speaker.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer 9 and 19 together. The $21.7 billion of funding we committed to in October will kickstart the CCUS industry, supporting thousands of jobs in our industrial heartlands through the East Coast and High Net clusters. We continue to engage with important future projects such as Acorn in Scotland and Viking in the Humber, and will make further announcements following the spending review.
Matthew Patrick.
I thank my friend for his answer. He will recognise that Merseyside is a clean energy pioneer, a hub of carbon capture and hydrogen technology. The climate emergency is the challenge of our generation, and it will only be met through the collective endeavour of communities across our country, including mine in Wirral West. Can he set out how the government is supporting our communities to deliver good local energy projects?
Well, my honourable friend is entirely right about this, and I think what we've learnt over the last decade and more is that this is the biggest jobs opportunity of the 21st century. And nowhere is it more true than in the investments we're making in CCUS, and I am confident that members of his constituency will benefit. And the context of this, Mr. Speaker, is this, which is the CBI came out with a very important report a couple of weeks ago, and it showed that the net zero economy grew 3 times faster than the economy as a whole last year. And the whole House should let that sink in, because what that tells you is that if you turn your back on the net zero economy, you turn your back on business, you turn your back on jobs, and you turn your back on investment.
Richard Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree there is huge potential for carbon capture and storage to play a key role in our green energy ambitions for Scotland? And as we look towards the spending review, does he agree the Acorn project presents an excellent and efficient opportunity to invest in CCUS and to reduce the carbon impacts of industries across Scotland, as it will repurpose existing pipelines?
Well, look, I congratulate my honourable friend, who is a fantastic advocate for this project, and we are hugely supportive of the Acorn project. Track 1 projects were agreed in the budget last year at a fiscal event, a fiscal moment, and the work we are currently doing in government is to look at these projects for the next phase, if you like, of the spending review, which will come in June. But I don't think anyone is in any doubt about the potential value of the Acorn project, not just to Scotland, but the whole of the United Kingdom.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, nobody who cares about the future of our children and our grandchildren would gainsay the importance of carbon capture. But does the Secretary of State not understand that he's undermining that good work by, notwithstanding his answer to my right honourable friend, continuing to subsidise the Drax power station, which is cutting down forests in Canada, turning the wood into pellets, shipping it thousands of miles across the Atlantic to burn here? It makes a nonsense of what he's trying to achieve.
I don't agree with the honourable gentleman, for whom I have great respect. The thing I would say to him is this, that the situation we inherited from the last government meant that we had to look at issues of security of supply and issues of how we got the best deal for bill payers. And that's what we did, and that's why we made the statement we did on Drax. For the longer term, he is absolutely right that we need to move away from unabated biomass, and we need to look at all of the possibilities that we can have to ensure that we move towards net zero, and that is what this government is doing.
Yes, Brownfellow.
Speaker, will the Secretary of State join me in congratulating the 6 students from Bourne Community College that came to Westminster yesterday to present their report on the future of hydrogen storage as a net zero approach to aviation? And does he agree with me that students engaging with STEM are actually really excited by the potential of clean power and carbon capture, and properly funding STEM in our schools will provide us with the next generation of scientists and engineers to help us achieve these goals?
I warmly join the Honourable Lady in congratulating the 6 students that she mentioned from her constituency, and I'm sure that I speak for all members of the House that when we meet young people who are engaged in the potential of clean energy technology to transform our country and our world, it is just an incredibly important reminder both about the potential this has in terms of jobs, but also our duties to those future generations.
Democrat spokesperson Edward Brother.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The IPPC has made clear that by 2050 we need to be removing 10 billion tonnes of carbon from the atmosphere every year if we are to stand a chance of keeping below the 1.5 degree target. It's clear that carbon removal and not just carbon capture and storage will play a critical role if we want to avoid a climate disaster. In the face of the party to my right once again embracing climate denialism, what steps will the government be taking to support the research, development and deployment of carbon removal technologies, ensuring that British companies become leaders in this emerging sector?
Well, I can thank you. I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I can tell him that my honourable friend, the Minister for Industry, did a round table with a whole range of industry voices on this precise topic last week. He is right about this, and you know there is scepticism about CCS in some parts of academia and others. All of the evidence I've seen is from the Climate Change Committee, the IPCC and others, the IEA, is that CCS technology has a crucial role to play in something like 20% of emissions, but he's also right that carbon removal, if you like, is the sort of next stage of that journey, and that is something my department is heavily engaged in.
Andrew Stone.
Question number 10, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'll answer questions 10, 13 and 17 together. Nuclear power is at the heart of our mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower, not just providing energy security, but driving billions in investment and creating thousands of highly skilled jobs. Great British Nuclear is on track to make final decisions in its small modular reactor competition this spring, while a final investment decision on Sizewell C will be made in the spending review.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Whether one agrees with the government's net zero targets or not, it will not be able to achieve it without the significant role that nuclear energy will play in that, which is why I was delighted that the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State chose to launch their nuclear strategy in my constituency. I can only assume my invite was lost in the post. But a key part of that is the nuclear fuel strategy in the nuclear fuel industry in this country. Because as we've seen from aggressive actions from Russia and other countries that have pushed Western commercial providers out or have dominated elements of the nuclear fuel enrichment and manufacturing market, it is ever more important for our national security that we develop that whole life cycle nuclear fuel production. So as part of the strategy, when will the government be announcing the concrete steps they will be taking to improve the whole life cycle of manufacturing of nuclear power?
The honourable gentleman makes a good point, and of course the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State and indeed the Minister for Nuclear in the other place has visited and seen the good work that is happening in his constituency, and of course I think just shy of £20 million has gone in to that work from government grants to help develop those nuclear fuels, and of course it will be part of the future. And when we are looking at whether it's the big nuclear development, Sizewell, Hinkley, whether it's the SMRs, whether it's the AMRs, you know, all of these things need to be in the mix, and he's absolutely right to make the point.
Smith.
Many of my constituents were pleased to see the extension of Xuexiang 1 and 2 late last year, and they'd like to see those long-term jobs for the future in the nuclear industry created in the northwest. Does the Minister agree with me that it's thanks to this Labour government that we are ending the legacy of no new nuclear being built that we saw under the last government?
I completely agree with my honourable friend. The party opposite built no new nuclear in 14 years. Small modular reactors will bring energy efficiency and economic growth to many parts of this country, and under the current law, each new reactor design is classed as... I agree with my honourable friend. We are working at pace, and we will make sure that we have the answer on the SMRs shortly. We will have the answer on Sizewell in the spending review, and of course the future has to have a big part of nuclear in it.
Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, small modular reactors, as the Minister says, will play an important part in delivering clean, cheap and secure energy across this country. However, current rules require that any reactor has to apply for regulatory justification, as if nuclear power was an entirely new practice instead of an existing one. So this delays reactors getting online, lowering energy bills for people across the country, including Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket, by up to 2 years. So, will the Secretary of State consider working with her Cabinet colleagues to simplify the system, recognising nuclear energy technology is an existing practice, and therefore accelerating the deployment of small modular reactors?
Another adjournment.
I will happily investigate this issue further that my honourable friend has raised. Of course, there's two pieces of work going on in this space. There's the draft nuclear planning policy statement and there's the nuclear regulatory task force. But of course, we want to make things as easy and as we can, and I'm very happy to talk to him further.
Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And small modular nuclear reactors are clearly the way forward in terms of decarbonising the grid. However, constant delays have actually held this up. So when does the Minister expect to be able to announce the first one being brought into operation, and when does she expect it actually to start work?
Well, I'm hoping we'll take less than the 14 years that the previous government failed to deliver anything. We will see the announcements on the first SMR in the spring, you know, of course, if anyone wants to build new nuclear in the country, our door is open to whatever they want to come and suggest.
Secretary of State Andrew Buck.
Much, Mr. Speaker. On the 6th of February, the Prime Minister announced he was going to take on the blockers and build new small modular reactors. Do those blockers include those in their own government? Essential work being delayed and paused at Sellafield, possible job losses at the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, still no certainty for Sizewell C due to a general fear in the industry that the spending review will stymie the ambitions of Great British Nuclear. Isn't it quite clear the biggest blockers to new nuclear in the UK are the Labour Treasury?
I'm not sure how many times the honourable member promised that he would get to FID on Sizewell under the last government. I think at least 5 times him and his colleagues in the House, and of course that didn't happen. And I just repeat gently that the previous government managed no new nuclear in 14 years, and the Shadow Minister himself admitted that the government had moved too slowly in getting nuclear projects off the ground. We are working at pace. We will deliver the answer to the competition in the spring. Sizewell C is also moving at pace, and we will have final answers in the spending review.
We're going to run on a bit because we're really behind. We've hardly got any questions in. Annalise Midgley.
Question number 12, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, for this government, good paying conditions for workers and the role of trade unions must be at the heart of the renewable energy sector, but this is the only route to a fair transition. Since we came to office, EDF Renewables has announced recognition agreements with 4 major trade unions. We applaud them for their decision and want others to follow suit. Through the Office for Clean Energy Jobs, we are also working with industry and trade unions to support fair pay, terms and conditions in the sector.
Annalise Midgley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for his answer. The Employment Rights Bill is an historic step forward for workers, but these rights must go hand in hand with good jobs. So can I ask,
what action is he taking to strengthen the UK's manufacturing capacity and supply chains to ensure that communities like mine in Knowsley benefit from the transition to net zero?
Well, my honourable friend is a brilliant advocate for her constituency and on this issue of manufacturing jobs. And if you look at what this government is doing, Mr. Speaker, from GB Energy to the National Wealth Fund to the Clean Industries Bonus, this is a government determined to make sure that we manufacture in Britain, we care about where things are made, and we are going to make those good manufacturing jobs happen.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
Number 14, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Meeting our clean power mission will require a significant increase in the deployment of both ground mount and rooftop solar projects. As well as consenting record amounts of ground-mounted solar, we want to see a much greater deployment of rooftop solar power, and we'll soon publish the solar roadmap, work which was started under the previous government to bring together our next steps in this area.
The government says that only 1% of agricultural land is going to be taken by solar farms, but in the pipeline around Gainsborough there are already 10,000 acres going to be put onto solar farms, another 4,000 announced a couple of weeks ago. Up to 15% of my constituency, the most arable, the most fertile in the country. So I just make one request to the Secretary of State. I think it's quite reasonable. When he considers these applications, we look at them in the round, not just take one individual one, but look at their cumulative effect on food production and on the local environment. Quite a reasonable request.
Well, I would just say on the question of even under the most ambitious scenarios, less than 1% of agricultural land would be occupied by solar farms. He makes a point around how these are holistically planned, and I think this is why it's so important we've taken forward strategic spatial energy planning so that we can have that coherent view of the entire energy system. It's work we should have done many, many years ago. We're now moving at pace to do that. But individual planning applications are obviously...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that the party opposite oppose large-scale solar, net zero, onshore wind, I'm tempted to ask the Minister what he makes of the party opposite's new energy policy, which is to take us back to the past, rub two sticks together and hope for the best. But could I ask the Minister instead to update the House on the progress of GB Energy in delivering our clean energy mission?
Well, I think we've rehearsed the arguments about the absolute failure of the previous government for the past 14 years, and they've just gone further back on it today. But on the question of GB Energy, I was delighted to be in Aberdeen yesterday to join the board of Great British Energy for their first board meeting. The bill will soon, we hope, complete its passage through Parliament, and then it can get on with delivering for the British people.
We come to topicals. Steph Ackerman.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Britain is 1% of global climate emissions. China is the world's largest emitter. Yet no UK Energy Secretary has visited in 8 years to make the case for why China needs to do more. That's why I've been in Beijing making the case for climate action, because engagement, not negligence, is what fighting for Britain looks like. On climate, as on so much else, this government believes that Britain can only protect our national interest by engaging on the international stage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Bacton Energy Hub in my constituency is undergoing a green transition, which I support because I believe in protecting our natural environment and boosting our economy through net zero, two things the Conservatives seem to have abandoned. Green hydrogen at Bacton needs wind power to be brought in from the coast. Will the Secretary of State help make this happen, and will he visit Bacton with me in person to see the potential for himself?
Well, this, among many others, is a very, very important potential project, and I think the honourable gentleman is right to make the case for it. Green hydrogen is absolutely part of our energy mix in the future.
Rinder Singh Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's commitment to nuclear energy. I recently met with representatives of Nucleo, a company developing small modular reactors using lead-cooled fast reactor technology, using depleted uranium and plutonium, materials that we have an abundance of as current waste materials from our existing nuclear programme. Can the Secretary of State detail what he's doing to ensure that the industrial strategy takes account of all aspects of the nuclear jigsaw, including the wide variety of technologies on offer?
Clean energy is one of the 8 growth sectors in the industrial strategy and will provide a core part of that strategy. And if anybody wants to build new nuclear in this country, our door is always open.
Andrew Bowish.
Mr. Speaker, last month, with surprising little fanfare from the Department or the Secretary of State, the Climate Change Committee published Carbon Budget 7, and among the more eye-watering recommendations was the figure put on the cost of meeting the obligations. Mr. Speaker, it was £319 billion over the next 15 years. Front-loading, there will be a net cost to industry every year until 2050. Can I ask the Secretary of State, is this exorbitant cost the reason he cancelled his department's review into the whole system's cost of net zero commissioned by his predecessor?
Mr. Speaker, I deeply regret the direction in which the honourable gentleman is going. I think the Climate Change Committee does incredibly important work. We will look at CB7, but the biggest cost we face as a country is we do not act on the climate crisis. That is what would leave hundreds of billions of pounds of cost to future generations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, he might be content with signing our energy sovereignty over to the People's Republic of China. He might be happy with his government's arbitrary targets and bans pushing bills up, leaving us more reliant on imports and costing jobs. But we think it's time for a new approach. As the Leader of the Opposition said this morning, one focused on security and cost to the consumer and not on pie-in-the-sky targets with no plan to reach them. So will he recommission the review into the whole system's cost? And if not, what is he trying to hide?
Mr. Speaker, it is the Tory party that has an energy surrender policy, surrendering us to fossil fuel markets controlled by petrostates and dictators. They keep us locked into fossil fuels. They would threaten billions of pounds of investment in net zero, and they would and grandchildren a terrible legacy. That is the Conservative Party in 2025. Anti-jobs, anti-growth, anti-business, anti-future generations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the plans brought forward last week to provide money off for people living near new energy infrastructure? Does the Minister agree with me that this is yet another thing that the party opposite promised but never had the ability to deliver?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to say that we've moved forward on delivering that if people host important infrastructure in their constituencies, they should benefit from it. The party opposite consulted on this, like so many things they talked about and talked about and talked about, but failed to deliver in 14 years. We're moving on with delivering it.
Democrat spokesperson Edwin Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In their recent advice for the 7th Carbon Budget, the Climate Change Committee highlighted the urgency of ensuring cheaper electricity so households can transition away from gas heating. When will the government act to improve energy security and reduce costs for households who are seeking to adopt low-carbon heating by reforming policy costs on energy bills?
Mr. Speaker, as we discussed earlier in the session, I think the CCC raises an important issue that we need to look at. And the key question about this so-called rebalancing is it has to be looked at in the context of understanding the principled case, but also ensuring that if we go down that route or another route, we do so in a way that is fair. And that is the work that my department is engaged on.
Alan Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've met a number of families recently who are members of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme, and I know they will welcome the comments from the Minister earlier. But as has been said, many of those residents are in their 70s and 80s. They are keen for answers. So could the Minister expand on her earlier comments to say more about what the next steps are and when my constituents might get a sense of the timeline and progress going forward?
Can I thank him for his concern for his constituents? I'm very receptive, as I said, to calls from BCSS trustees. I wrote to the Chancellor. The Chancellor sent back a positive response, and we are now taking the next steps in this process, and I will be reconvening trustees to meet and talk about it again.
Joshua Reynolds.
Mr. Speaker, Martin, a disabled resident, lives in his park home in Maidenhead. His boiler broke down 2 months ago and has faced significant challenges. Unable to apply for the boiler upgrade scheme, as park homes do not get EPCs, and the National Energy Foundation having visited 3 weeks ago but still not providing him a response. Could the Secretary of State outline what support he can give Martin and other elderly residents without heat or hot water?
Thank you to the honourable member for that question. Look, we are very aware of the issues with park homes. There is support that is provided to park homes through industry support. As we think about how we expand the warm homes discount and the support that we provide for households that can't afford their energy, we will of course have park homes in our mind.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that crucial to achieving our world-leading net zero goals will be community ownership projects? And will the Minister come to Edinburgh to see some of the fantastic community power projects that we have there?
Yes, it sounds really good, and community energy is a crucial part of our energy future.
Trevor Lee.
The Secretary of State and their neighbours could he take a short car journey to Gainsborough to visit the new fusion site at West Burton? This is probably the most exciting development in green energy we've ever had in this country, creating unlimited jobs, unlimited green energy. Will he join me in Gainsborough?
Well, the honourable gentleman and I don't necessarily agree on everything, but on this we agree. The transformation of the West Burton site from a fossil fuel-fired power station to fusion is an incredibly exciting project, and we should all be battering for it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister may be aware that SSE is supporting over 1,000 new homes in rural Scotland to aid energy infrastructure development. Does he agree with me that the SNP Scottish Government's failure to get a grip on a rural housing crisis is a major barrier to infrastructure development? And will he urge SSE to expand their scheme into my constituency, where they have key projects around the communities of Cullen, Lochernhead, Tyndrum and Creanlarich?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question, and he underlines just how important it is, not just for delivering on energy projects, but the wider economic benefits that come from building infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure that the party opposite now opposes. But he's right to say that in order to deliver these projects, we also need to see investment in rural communities by the Scottish Government, and will continue to press them on those issues.
Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kent County Council plans to introduce 10,000 on-street car chargers over the next decade. For context, Kent has a population of 1.6 million people. At this rate, Kent will have burnt down by the time we all have electric on-street car charging. What can the Secretary of State do to speed this up?
Well, can I say the honourable gentleman is raising a really important issue. Rolling out this electric car infrastructure is incredibly important. If he writes to my department, we'll ensure he gets the best possible reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will ministers consider exercising the community electricity right within the 2015 Infrastructure Act to require commercial renewable energy developers to offer communities the opportunity to part-own schemes developed in their area?
So he raises a really important issue, Mr. Speaker. As a sort of energy nerd, I'm really interested in this 2015 power, which I didn't actually know about, despite my nerdery. And we are actively looking at this really important power put in place by the last government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In response to a written question to me last week, the Minister confirmed that no nationally significant infrastructure projects have been consented which will use greater than 50% best and most versatile agricultural land. In my constituency, the East Park Energy Solar Farm is close to 75%, but under the overarching National Policy Statement for Energy, 5.11.34 states that the Secretary of State should ensure that applicants do not site their scheme on the best and most versatile land without justification. So can the Minister confirm to me whether the nearly 1,500 acres of best and most versatile land is too much good quality agricultural land to sacrifice?
Well, the honourable gentleman will know that on any nationally significant project, it goes through a proper planning process, and it wouldn't be right for me to comment on that, but I'm sure that the decision makers will be looking closely at the issues he raised.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There is to be a much reduced testing process of oil at the import terminal at Grangemouth, and if this imported oil doesn't pass these reduced tests, it can't be used, leading to Scotland suffering a fuel shortage. Is the Secretary of State concerned at this?
Well, throughout, of course, the 7 months that we've been in government, we've been doing everything we can to work with the operators of the Grangemouth refinery. Of course, we were disappointed by the closure of that. We've carried out, of course, a number of pieces of work around fuel security. We're not concerned about fuel security at this point, but of course, across the whole country, it's something we keep constantly under review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the League of the Opposition thinks achieving net zero is impossible without, quote, bankrupting us, for communities like Severn Beach in my constituency, investment in low-carbon energy could create valuable skilled jobs. What steps will the government take to ensure that the area around the River Severn gets the investment it needs to realise its potential?
The honourable lady is absolutely right. The opposition is off to the wacky races, frankly. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to net zero, we on this side know, and this government knows the truth, that net zero is the economic opportunity of the